Top stitching is the final step in the garment making process, and when it's done right, it can really elevate the look of your entire design. In this video, I want to share 5 amazing tips on how to elevate your top stitching game. Even if you've been sewing for several years, I hope that a few of these tips will surprise you. This video is created in partnership with Orga Needles, needle industry experts. We will start with my personal favorite tip is how to reuse jeans thread. Whenever you're doing alterations on jeans or denim, the most tricky part is to find the right matching thread. But you can actually reuse the existing thread. Let's say you want to take in the jeans waist or take in the hem of the jeans. Gently unpick the existing seam so that you have enough top thread. You don't have to unpick the entire seam, just the part where you want to fix and alter the garment. When the garment is altered and you want to do that final top stitching, take that thread that you unpicked, which is remaining in the seam, feed it through your sewing machine needle, hold the thread and make a few stitches with your sewing machine as top stitching seam. And this is how you can easily reuse the same thread from an already existing garment. And when you're doing alterations on jeans, you want to make sure you're using a right jeans needle. Jeans needle is slim and sharp pointed. The slim set point reduces the penetration resistance and prevents needle and thread breakages. Now, one nuance about this particular technique that when the needle is going down, it will need quite a lot of thread. So at the end, you may not be able to finish the seam using a sewing machine, and at this time you may just want to take the entire thread and finish doing stitches by hand. When I saw this technique in real life for the first time, my teacher at the sewing school showed me, I was completely blown away because it's absolutely amazing technique. It's very niche, but sometimes it will come very handy. Now that we're talking about threads, let's move on to number 2, top stitching threads. To create a beautiful top stitching seam, you often want to use a thicker, heavy-duty thread. It's much thicker than the standard universal all-purpose thread, and it creates a very beautiful seam. However, sometimes you will find yourself in a situation where you want to do top stitching, but you do not have the right color of thicker thread. To solve the situation, you want to take 2 threads, feed your sewing machine with both threads just as you would with a single thread, and make a seam. Both threads are acting as one thread and creates a beautiful seam. Here's a comparison that you can see with heavy-duty thread, single thread of all-purpose thread, and 2 all-purpose threads. If you don't have 2 matching cones, just wind a spare bobbin and use it instead of the second spool. For this technique, you want to also use top stitching needle. This needle has a larger and longer eye. This needle is suitable for sewing seams with thicker threads. It can also be used for sewing buttonholes, decorative stitches with thicker thread, and reaper embroidery. Because of that large eye, this needle is also very easy to thread. Before moving on to the next tip, I wanted to mention that I started doing monthly newsletters where I answer your sewing questions. If you want to learn more about sewing and join my email newsletter community, I will link it in the description box down below. Let's move on to tip number 3. When you're sewing pockets, the weak point of the pocket is the very top. Instead of just finishing it with a straight stitch, you can create bar tacks. Your sewing machine might have a special bar tack stitch. Take a buttonhole foot and set the length of the bar tack you want to create. Position your pocket under the presser foot so that the needle drops about 2 millimeters from the top edge of the pocket. Lower the presser foot and let the machine create a beautiful bar tack. Alternatively, if your sewing machine does not have a bar tack stitch, you can use either a very narrow zigzag or you can do a buttonhole stitch with just one side. Using the stitch will create a very strong seam finish and your pocket will not rip away. Tip number 4 is doing top stitching on materials like vinyl or faux leather. Now, the nuance with working with this type of materials is that they cannot be pinned before sewing because pins will leave permanent marks. I saw this absolutely amazing tip on Instagram to use painter's tape to hold items like pockets on faux leather to do top stitching. Painter's tape is very easy to remove, it doesn't leave any residue, so when you're doing that top stitching seam, just gently, slowly remove that tape. Alternatively, if you do not have a painter's tape, you can also use special fabric glue. Whenever you're working with fabric like faux leather, you want to make sure you're using a right leather needle. This needle looks very different compared to standard universal needle. It has a unique shaped knife point that makes stable size needle holes. It makes a larger hole and it's suitable when sewing heavy fabrics like leather with heavy duty thread. Fifth and final tip. This is a rather basic tip, but I wish I've known this sooner in my sewing journey. When you're doing top stitching, don't look at the needle. Instead, what you want to do is you want to focus on how the fabric edge aligns with your presser foot. Let's see, in this case, I'm focusing that my edge of the fabric is going right along that inner edge of the presser foot. And this is a secret how to always get those beautiful straight stitches. I hope you enjoyed these 5 top stitching tips and learned something new. If you enjoyed this video, here's a video that you may be interested in watching next. Thank you for joining me today and I will see you next time. Bye!